Welcome back to Movies Recapped. Today I will show you a historical drama from 2014, called The Imitation Game. Warning: spoilers ahead. Watch out and enjoy. In the year 1951 in Manchester, England, a man sits alone in an interrogation room. While there are images of a ransacked home on the screen, a narration begins. It says that just because the man is being questioned, does not mean that he is the one who is in control of the situation. He says that he needs the detective to listen to his entire story before he passes any judgment, and that if he can't do that, then this interrogation is over. Two policemen, Knock and Stale, are at the ransacked house to investigate, though nothing has been reported taken. They bring in the man whose house it is, a mathematician named Alan Turing, in for questioning. This is the man we heard speaking before. He says that he just wants to be left alone. Knock, though, thinks that Alan is hiding something and brings him in. While he is being interrogated by Detective Knock, Alan talks about his time working with a top-secret group at Bletchley Park during World War II. Flashback to London in 1939, kids are being evacuated to the countryside to keep them safe. Among them on the train out of London is Alan. He arrives at an estate in Sherwood called Bletchley Radio Manufacturing, where he is given a job interview with Commander Alistair Denniston. When he finds out that Alan doesn't speak German, Denniston nearly has him thrown out. However, when Alan proves his intellect by telling Denniston what the top-secret project they're working on is, and that they clearly have made no headway with it, he is hired. Alan joins the team of cryptographers who are working on analyzing and understanding the German Enigma machine, which is what the Nazis used to send coded messages that are allegedly unbreakable. Also on this team are Hugh Alexander, John Cairncross, Peter Hilton, Keith Furman, and Charles Richards. They receive the intercepted German messages and try to find some sort of pattern in them. Unfortunately, the settings on the Enigma can be changed, meaning that no 2 days ever have the same code. The Germans were so confident in their Enigma code that they did not bother to try to conceal messages. Anyone with an AM radio could hear them. However, it was only if you had your own Enigma machine that you could plug the message into that you would understand it. They sent every secret attack plan, U-boat strike, and troop movement this way. Turing explains that there are so many possible settings, that if 10 men each checked one possible setting every minute, it would take them 20 million years to go through all the options. The other men in the cryptology department find it difficult to work with Alan and have filed a complaint against him. He may be a genius when it comes to numbers, but his social skills are minimal. His belief that his co-workers are beneath him only further alienates Alan from the group. Instead of working with them to try to break the daily codes, Alan is working alone to try to design a machine that would decipher the Enigma messages every day, no matter what setting the Enigma is on. Back in 1951, Detective Knock is trying to learn more about Alan. When he calls to have Alan's wartime records pulled, he hits a dead end since they are classified. This confuses him. Why would a professor, of all people, have classified war records? He replaces Alan's name on a letter of inquiry and takes it to the Military Affairs Office, saying that Foreign Affairs sent him. When he gets the envelope that is supposed to have Alan's confidential war records, all he gets is an empty envelope. Someone's war records being classified is one thing, but for them to have been destroyed is another, and this just frustrates him more. He starts to think that Alan must be a spy for Russia since he was at Cambridge at the same time as two other men who also had their military files erased. At Bletchley, designing the machine is just the first step Alan must take. After he completes the design, he has to build it. That, unfortunately, will cost the program more than Denniston is willing to pay. He tests Denniston's patience and is told that he needs to listen to his commanding officer. Alan counters and asks Denniston who his commanding officer is. It is none other than Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and if Alan has a problem with Denniston's decision, he is welcome to take it up with him. Not one to pick up on sarcasm, Alan does just that. Surprisingly, Churchill writes back and is in support of Alan. Churchill funds the machine and puts Alan in charge of the division, and he immediately fires Furman and Richards. The rest of the team is, obviously, unhappy with this turn of events and asks Alan how he could be so callous. Flashback even further to 1928 and a young Alan at boarding school. He is bullied, trapped under the floorboards, and is deeply unhappy. Eventually he develops a friendship with Christopher Morcom, who tries to help him become less of a target to the bullies. At Bletchley, the cryptology team is now 2 people short. So, Alan places an ad in the paper in the form of a complicated crossword puzzle. Anyone that is able to solve it in under 10 minutes should call a certain number and they will be considered for a position. After they pass the initial test and call in, the candidates are given a new puzzle that must be completed in person and done in under 6 minutes. Joan Clark, the only woman to be invited to take the test, is the first person to solve the puzzle, and the only one to do so in the allotted time frame. She is offered the job, but her parents, who she still lives with since she is unmarried, refuse to let her live and work with the other cryptographers who are all male. In another boarding school flashback, we see Alan getting closer to his new friend. The viewer learns that Alan's later love for cryptology was sparked by Christopher, who introduced him to it. It is clear that Alan's feelings towards Christopher have developed past the friendly level and have turned romantic. In 1940, Turing finds a solution to let Joan work there. He arranges for her to live and work with the clerks who intercept the messages and are all women. This satisfies her parents, and Joan is allowed to move to Bletchley for the duration of the war. The other cryptographers grow to resent him more every day. They unfairly blame the whole group's failure to solve Enigma solely on Alan. They tell him that if he would help them instead of working on his machine, they may actually get somewhere, and every day that they don't solve Enigma is another day where hundreds of British soldiers die. Seemingly upset by their words, Alan smuggles some of the previous day's messages out of the office. With the stolen coded messages, he sneaks into Joan's room to work with her on them. She asks him about the machine he is trying to build, which he has named Christopher, and if it is the same one that he theorized about and published several years earlier. She read his paper about it and was fascinated about the idea of a machine that wasn't just programmable, but that could be reprogrammed. The next day when Alan gets to work, he finds that the room and particularly his desk, is being searched by soldiers. It is revealed that there is a spy at Bletchley. A message to Moscow was intercepted, and Deniston suspects Alan. Eventually, though, with Joan's help, Alan is able to start to warm up to his colleagues. She sort of becomes his interpersonal coach and helps him to put on a more friendly face. She tells him that they will never help him build his machine if they don't like him, so the only way to not have to work alone is to make an effort towards them. The next day, he does make an effort to be kind towards them, but he does it in his own Alan way. He brings them each an apple, and stammers his way through a joke. The team may not understand him at all, but they are able to see that he is trying. This leads Hugh, the former team leader, to even extend his own olive branch. He gives Alan some advice on how to possibly get his machine to work. Finally, Christopher, the machine, is ready. Alan sets it up and turns it on. Unfortunately, the machine cannot work through all of the possible settings in time before the Germans change them at midnight. Deniston, who still neither trusts nor likes Alan, orders that Christopher be destroyed, and Alan fired. The other cryptographers come to his rescue though and threaten to quit if Alan is fired because they believe in the machine. They bargain for more time and are only given 1 month to get the machine to fully work. Flash forward to 1951, and the police finally have a possible break in figuring out what Alan is hiding from them. An officer followed him to a pub where he met with another man. When they parted, the officer tailed him and shook him down, and the man admitted that he is homosexual, which was a crime in England at the time. Even more illegal, is that Alan paid the man for his company. It turns out though, that the man then robbed Alan's house, which is why he didn't want the police poking around in his private matters. Back at Bletchley, Joan tells Alan that she has to leave the community because her parents have changed their minds. They don't like that she is still unmarried at 25 and now living alone and away from home. In response, Alan does the only thing he can think of to get her to stay. He proposes, and she accepts. At their engagement celebration, Alan confesses to his suspecting co-worker, John Cairncross, that he is gay. John urges him to keep it secret for both his job security and overall safety. In a quick flashback to his boarding school days, the viewer learns that Alan has experienced his first heartbreak. Christopher did not return to school after the holiday break. Alan is pulled into the headmaster's office where he is told that Christopher has died from tuberculosis. As time is winding down on the deadline to get the machine to work, Alan hears a conversation between Joan and another clerk about intercepting messages from the same German coder. She says that each person types the messages a little bit differently from anyone else, and so that helps you get to know who is typing. For example, one man, instead of sending 5 random letters as instructed, always sends the same 5 letters at the start of his message, silly, which she believes to be the name of his girlfriend or wife. This gets Alan thinking and he realizes that he can pre-program Christopher to decode words that he knows to be in certain messages. The cryptographers rush back to their workspace to test this theory out. They go through previous messages and realize that every day the Germans send a weather report out at 6 a.m., and that report will always contain the words weather, Heil, and Hitler. This cuts out a large number of options that Christopher has to work through, and speeds the process up significantly. In fact, that small bit of information reveals enough of the day's Enigma code that they are able to decode all of the messages from the day in very little time. After calibrating their Enigma machine to the code that Christopher figured out, they successfully and quickly decode a message. The cryptographers are ecstatic to have finally broken the German Enigma. Their joy is short-lived, though, when they decode another message that shows that a civilian convoy is about to be attacked. Alan says they can't suddenly reroute the convoy because then the Germans will know that the British have cracked their code. This will lead them to change their machinery and put the British back at square one. This decision is made even harder when one of the cryptographers realizes that his brother is stationed on one of the ships that will be attacked. After letting this attack happen, Alan creates a statistical model to measure which intelligence they should act on, and what they need to let happen to keep letting the Germans believe Enigma is safe. They need to make as few changes as possible, while also minimizing the destruction as much as possible. British intelligence has to work to keep even their own leaders in the dark about breaking Enigma, because if they knew, they would act in a way that would let the Germans know it was broken. So, the agencies that are aware that Enigma is broken will have to come up with some reason for their new line of intelligence. Soon after Enigma is cracked, Alan discovers that John Cairncross, the same man that he came out to, is a Soviet spy. When Alan confronts him about this, John argues that the Soviets and British have the same end goal, to defeat the Germans. He threatens to keep Alan quiet by revealing his sexuality to Denniston. When the top MI6 agent, Stuart Menzies, threatens Joan with jail time for having the stolen and decoded Enigma manuscripts in her bedside table, Alan risks his own safety and gives up the information that John is a spy. Menzies says that he and his team already know this and have been feeding John the information that MI6 wanted to get leaked to the Soviets. He tells Alan that now he needs his help to determine what new information from Enigma to leak to the Soviets. Alan does not want to help with this, but is forced into it. While fearing for Joan's safety, Alan tells her to leave Bletchley immediately. Alan confesses to her that he is a homosexual, and she says that she had been suspecting it for some time, and insists that the two of them could still lead a happy life together. He tells her that he never cared for her at all, and that the only reason he wanted her at Bletchley was for her cryptography skills. This leaves her absolutely heartbroken, but she decides to stay anyway, saying that what she is doing now is the most important work she will ever do. She's tired of trying to live up to expectations that her parents have set for her, and doesn't care what they, or Alan, think of her decisions anymore. With one final blow to his character, she says that the other cryptographers were right, Alan is a monster. Once the war is finally over, Menzies tells the cryptographers to burn all of their work. This war is over, but there will be more in the future. MI6 wants the world to continue to believe that the Germans have an unbreakable coding machine. The team is instructed to never meet again and to never speak about what they did during the war. Despite this command, Alan takes Christopher with him. Back in 1952, Alan is convicted with the crime of gross indecency. Rather than take a jail sentence, he undergoes chemical castration so that he is able to continue his work. Joan visits him and watches as he declines both physically and mentally. She wants to do anything to help him, but Alan does not want it. He says that if, for any reason, he stops taking the medicine he is required to take by the courts, that they will take Christopher away from him. Joan tries to comfort him by doing a crossword puzzle with him, but his mind has clearly been affected by the medication. Then she tries to comfort him by saying that no matter how much Alan may wish he was normal, she never could wish that about him. It's because he is so far above normal that he was able to do his work, which single-handedly saved millions of lives. The film concludes with an epilogue that reveals that after a year of required hormone therapy, Alan ended his own life on June 7, 1954. In 2013, Queen Elizabeth II granted him a posthumous royal pardon for his so-called crime of homosexuality, and honored his life's work. It is estimated that because of the work that Alan and his colleagues did, the war was shortened by 2 years and that more than 14 million lives were spared. Though the work that the cryptographers did was secret for more than 50 years, Alan's continued work has inspired generations of researchers to develop what scientists now call Turing machines. Today, they are called computers. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.